Hello and welcome to MyNation. I am Siddharth Rai. We have with us once again Rajya Sabha MP Mr. Rajeev Chandrasekhar. In fact, he is a three-time member of Parliament, one of the keenest policy minds of India. He is a member of the Standing Committee on Finance. None better to talk to when the country is expecting a budget and everybody is looking at the performance of the Indian economy. Hello, sir. Sir, this is the last budget of the Modi government's tenure. It's drawing to a close now. And often it has been accused of going into bad financial management. What's your take on it?
No, I think there are two things. I think this is the last budget of, I'm hoping, Narendra Modi's first term as Prime Minister. So I'm hoping there are many more budgets that he would present. Look, I think it is election season, and therefore predictably there will be people who will try and spin the last 5 years as being not what it is. That is what politics is about. But let's be clear about one thing. If you measure Prime Minister Modi's performance vis-a-vis the economy, you have to understand very clearly what he started with. He started with, in 2014, an economy that was almost bankrupted by the UPA, and for all of their wanted economic management of Manmohan Singh and Chidambaram, they left an economy that was at 0% industrial production, record fiscal deficit of 5.7%, inflation for 12 quarters, a galloping inflation of 9.5%, current account deficit of $45 billion, a banking system that had been wrecked. The reason I am saying all this is, to measure where we are today, we must understand where we started from.
Right.
We are not operating in an abstract.
Right.
I think Prime Minister Modi has, and Arun Jaitley has, with great fiscal responsibility, these 5 years rebuilt the economy. It is not so much about big bang measures and announcements and marketing blitzes. This is about slowly and systematically rebuilding the economy and taking some decisions that would seem painful today, but decisions that are structurally important for the future well-being of our economy. Right. So I would give, if I was a professor of economics, which I'm not, I would give this effort a very high 8.5. Of course, like any government, some assumptions were made which didn't turn out to be true. I would argue that, for example, the public sector banking system could have been recapitalized earlier. Maybe the IBC bill could have been passed by the parliament earlier, and so on and so forth. But to understand the performance of the economy, one must understand what Prime Minister Modi started with. And if you understand that reasonably dispassionately, you will understand that this economy has travelled a great distance in the last 5 years.
Right, sir. Let's talk about the tax net of India. We are a country with very low tax base, as in terms of people who pay their taxes, and this brings a lot of burden onto them because they are also then footing the bill for those who are evading taxes. So what can the government do to widen this tax net, make Indian economy low tax rate and high compliant?
So this is a good question, because I think when you look at the fact that we are 70 years as an independent nation and we have amongst the lowest tax GDP ratios in the world, 60 years of the Congress government has almost consciously created a tax evasion ecosystem and culture, which in itself would not be bad if people were getting off taxes is fine, but it was putting a disproportionate amount of taxation burden on the middle class and the professional salaried class for bearing the burden of the government's budget. So that is why India still remains a reasonably high taxed country compared to many of the other higher growing economies. And if you see what Prime Minister Modi has done, he has essentially laid the basis of a tax GDP expansion, therefore compliance, both direct and indirect taxes, which will, in my opinion, over the next 5 years, create a situation where there will be a moderation of taxes, even on direct taxes, for the normal middle class and salaried class. You have seen that already with GST.
Right.
As GST compliance has increased, the taxes have moderated. And that is exactly what will happen, in my opinion, as more and more Indians come onto the tax net, which is a consequence of demonetization, and the burden on the actual taxpayers will get then divided and shared amongst more people.
So this budget, can we expect something, given the economic as well as the political logic, for some changes along these lines?
Look, I don't know, because first of all, I'm not privy to what the budget will be, but I think it is safe to assume that having borne the burden for the last 5 years, and I have publicly made a call for this through my tweets and so on, that it's a legitimate expectation from the middle class that there is some relief given to them. I think it's also a legitimate requirement for the country that we also provide a better security, social security net for our farmers and those in rural distress. So I think this budget will see both those. We have already had one part of that play out before the budget at the GST Council, where the GST rates have become more moderated, have come down. So the call of the middle class and the call of the professional salaried class that their burden should start easing, maybe in this budget we will see a little bit of that.
Also brings us to the question of job creation. For quite some time, this government has been, in the dock because of allegations that it has failed to create jobs as it had promised. Do you think so?
Look, I think this is a difficult question to answer, not because the jobs have not been created. I think the economic narrative around jobs is always like some obscure science, because everybody is operating off different sets of data. And because there is such little organized data on the informal sector and the formal sector in terms of job creation, the government relies on the EPFO data. Now, it's easy for that data to be mocked and defeated and so on and so forth, because it doesn't cover the informal sector. So this narrative that jobs have not been created or the jobs have been destroyed is easy to put out, because there is no competing data to counter that. But I don't think any common sense, dispassionate thinking person in India today believes that after so many $1 billion of investment that has gone into the economy, so much of construction that has gone into infrastructure, that jobs have not been created. There is job loss in certain segments of the economy, but remember, any growing economy, as certain segments of the economy become non-competitive or tend to become less competitive compared to, let's say, imports or other forces in India, or even due to automation and so on and so forth, job losses are a part of the nature of a growing economy. The question is there a net job addition or is there net job loss? I will contend very strongly today with the EPFO data and other empirical evidence of investment that there have been substantial number of jobs created in this economy, substantial investment has gone into the economy, and this is the myth of jobless growth is exactly that. It's myth before elections.
Right. So another narrative which is being created quite recently, though, is that the government, having had decided on this 10% quota for the general category and the economic implications of that. Added to that, rumors about a certain scheme of direct benefit transfer for farmers, even the talks of loan waiver, all these things, who will pay for it? Isn't it bad, economy?
No, look, I think there are two things here. One is that the responsibility of a country or responsibility of its people, a responsibility of a government to safeguard the interests of those who are deprived and who need a leg up is inarguable. I mean, we have to do it. The best way, and as I've been saying in almost every budget speech of mine in Parliament, the best way to ensure that we can spend more to address the issues of those who need more is to ensure that the economy grows. If the economy grows, the government gets more money to spend, and that money can be spent wisely in these areas. So the real question that you should be posing to me is not who's bearing the burden, that will the economy grow strongly enough to ensure that this burden or this cost can be met by the government and not by putting additional taxation on those who are already paying taxes. And the only way we can ensure that those who pay taxes do not pay additional taxes to meet this legitimate cost of the government or this legitimate need of the government is to ensure that we have a political leadership that ensures that the economy grows. Being a socialist and writing checks that are based on the earnings of some other citizen is an easy thing. That is what the communists have done and destroyed economies all around the world, including in some parts in our country. So we need more of what we saw in the last 5 years. We need that to continue for the next 5 years, and we need that headroom and fiscal capacity of the government to keep growing so that these new schemes and these new social security packages can be funded, and not by taxing the already taxed middle class or the already taxed salary class.
So you don't think this is a page out of leftist economics?
It can be a page out of leftist economics if you don't accompany this with an economic growth model. If we cannot grow at 9.5% for the next 5 years, then this becomes socialism, and this becomes taxing the already taxed. That is why it's very important that when political leaders in this election season start talking about numbers and tossing schemes around, you must also ask yourselves a simple question: who is the leader or who is the party that will allow the economy to be growing robustly enough to be able to afford these kind of necessary expenditures?
Right. Also, another criticism of this government, when Mr. Modi came to power, he said that his government will be less about government, more about governance. But we have seen ministries have been added. So hasn't he gone back on that?
No, so I can't speak for Prime Minister Modi. I'm, at best you can describe me as a supporter of his. In 2010, I was one of the few who sort of coined that phrase, maximum governance, minimum government. Because I believe that every Indian today does not want the government in his or her life more than what is necessary, but at the same time wants the government to do its job well. So maximum governance people want, they want minimum corruption, but they also want government to interfere in the life less. I think this government has done substantially well in the issue of maximum governance. This is a government that is unprecedented in terms of its hard work, determination, and its determination to remove corruption, which is the biggest source of evil in governance. Now, in the 5 years that Prime Minister Modi has been Prime Minister, has he been able to downsize government? Has he been able to do it sufficiently enough? Probably not. But minimum government is not something that you can immediately overnight create. It is, remember, we are a set of institutions in government and governance that are 70 years old. Right. So to transform those, to make them more nimble, to make them smaller, make them less expensive on the taxpayer and less of a burden on a common citizen, is a process of transformation, in my opinion, that we will see as the other pressing issues of this country have been addressed, which is, for example, the economy, security, and so on and so forth. Yes, it has not been minimum government, but are we on course to do that? Ideologically and philosophically, is this a government that believes more in empowering citizens rather than ruling them? Yes. Is this a government that believes essentially that citizens have to be empowered with capital and finances and subsidies so that they can build their own destiny and future? Yes. Is this a government that has sufficiently managed to reduce the footprint of the government? Probably not. I think that will take, we should give him another 5 years.
Right, sir, right. Okay, so let's continue the discussion on economy. Let's talk about two flagship programs of this government, also associated with job creation. One was Startup India, second was Make in India. Startup India seems to have sort of miserably failed, while Make in India also has seen only a modest success. How do you see?
No, I don't agree. Look, I think you must understand both those things. Startup India was about creating a culture where a young Indian can fearlessly pursue his or her dreams without having to worry about capital, without having to worry about all the headaches of forming a company. And the startup culture in India today is more vibrant, if not equally vibrant, compared to most Western startup capitals of the world, like the Silicon Valley. Or so if you go to Bangalore, you go to Hyderabad, you go to many places, including Gurugram, you will find that the startup culture that is deeply now ingrained in our economic model. More and more youngsters are taking the plunge into entrepreneurship than ever before. More and more capital has come into the startup ecosystem. You see these big deals that have come in, whether it's Walmart buying out Flipkart or any of these big companies. These are all coming into essentially first generation entrepreneurs who are building their companies and growing it. So I don't agree with your characterization that Startup India has failed. It has succeeded tremendously. Yes, there are some parts of the government that are still not in coherence with it, and that is why you have these small issues like angel tax and so on and so forth. So that is a normal evolutionary process, that when something new starts, it is difficult to make all arms of the government come to sync all at the same time. So, and the Prime Minister has spoken about it and said that those issues will be resolved. In terms of Make in India, this issue of manufacturing capabilities and getting more and more foreign companies to manufacture here, I think the policy framework was put into place. Manufacturing and industrial activity has not, let us say, reached the potential or the expectations as much as we would, primarily because of one reason, which is that the banking system in India and the credit delivery system, and Indian manufacturing depends 80% on credit, on banks. And out of 80% of banks, 70% of those are public sector banks. So you had almost the entire public sector banking system, which is about 60% of the total capital required, moribund and stuck because of this NPA issue. So if you want to make the point that Make in India has not grown to the extent that it could have, I would accept it. It is a failure, I don't accept it. But can it, over the next 5 years, as the banking system slowly recapitalizes, do better? I believe today across the world, investors see India both from a startup point of view and from a point of view of manufacturing base as a serious alternative to China. And it is a country where there's good government, good governance, corruption is coming down. So all these things point to Make in India and Startup India growing even more in coming years. So I do not, in short, I don't subscribe to that characterization of yours. But they have had different results, of course.
Right. Brings us to our last question. What do you expect this budget will be about? I mean, what do you expect from the budget?
No, this is a budget that is a pre-election budget. I think it will signal that, I hope it signals that the middle class can look forward in coming years to a moderate taxation regime, more employment and economic growth opportunities. It will signal that the bottom of the pyramid, the rural Indian who has had to live over the last 70 years in a very volatile environment of income and debt and distress, will now get a social security system which will be extension of what the Prime Minister launched early in 15 and 16, which will be hopefully backed up with a income or an income subsidy model, which will basically take care of the fact that there is nobody in India that has to suffer from economic distress. And if that is done, I think this will be a good budget, because pretty much everything else structurally for this economy has been done in the first 4-5 budgets. So what is required today is only this pressing need for some relief for the middle class, and of course this expansion of the social security safety net for those in rural distress.
Thank you, sir. Thank you a lot for being with MyNation. I hope to see you again and again.
Thank you. Thanks, sir. Thank you.